The flashing red and blue lights cut through the night as Officer Daniels steps out of his cruiser, his face hardened with arrogance. He's done this 100 times before: pull over a black man, assume the worst, and make sure he knows who's in charge. Tonight is no different, or so he thinks. The man he orders out of the car is calm, composed, almost too confident. But Daniels doesn't care. When the man hesitates for even a second, the officer shoves him against the hood, gripping his wrist tighter than necessary. "Do you know who I am?" the man finally asks, his voice steady. Daniels scoffs. "Does it look like I care?" Minutes later, backup arrives, and with them, a wave of realization that sends a chill down Daniels' spine. The man he just assaulted isn't just anybody. He's the city's most powerful judge. And Daniels' nightmare is only beginning. The street is silent except for the crackle of the police radio. Officer Daniels' grip loosens slightly as he exchanges a glance with the arriving officers. Something feels off. One of them steps forward, eyes widening in shock as he recognizes the man now adjusting his suit, brushing off the rough treatment like it's nothing new. "Daniels," the officer says under his breath, barely hiding his panic. "You just put your hands on Judge Carter." For the first time that night, Daniels feels his confidence waver. His stomach tightens as he looks back at the man he dismissed so easily. Judge Carter meets his gaze, not with anger, but something worse: disappointment. Daniels swallows hard, his mind racing. He spent years enforcing the law, bending it when it suited him. But now he's the one under scrutiny. And the worst part: the judge hasn't said a word about what happens next. Daniels' pulse pounds in his ears. His training tells him to stay in control, but for the first time in his career, he feels powerless. The other officers avoid his eyes, waiting for someone to speak, to break the unbearable silence hanging in the air. But it's Judge Carter who finally steps forward, his voice calm but firm. "Officer Daniels, I assume you have a reason for this level of force?" he asks, his tone almost casual. Daniels opens his mouth, but nothing comes out. What can he say? That he saw a black man in an expensive car at night and made a snap judgment. That his instincts led him to act before thinking. He glances around, searching for backup, but none of his fellow officers are willing to defend him now. Judge Carter exhales, shaking his head. "I've seen men like you in my courtroom before," he says, "but I never expected to meet one like this." Daniels feels a cold sweat forming. His badge, his authority, everything he's relied on, is slipping through his fingers. But what terrifies him most is the unknown. Judge Carter hasn't called for his arrest, hasn't demanded his badge. He's just watching, waiting. And Daniels knows that whatever comes next is out of his hands. The weight of the moment presses down on Daniels like a vice. Every second of silence feels like a ticking bomb, ready to explode. His usual confidence, his shield, has shattered, leaving him exposed. The other officers linger awkwardly, their radios crackling, but no one dares to step in. They all know what's at stake. Judge Carter studies him, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he reaches into his jacket. Daniels stiffens, old habits kicking in. But instead of a weapon, Carter pulls out something much worse: a small leather case. He flips it open, revealing his official credentials. The gold seal gleams under the streetlights. Daniels' throat goes dry. The reality of the situation crashes over him like a tidal wave. He hadn't just harassed an innocent man, had assaulted one of the most powerful figures in the city's justice system. A man who now held his entire future in his hands. Carter looks him straight in the eye. "So, Officer Daniels," he says, voice steady, "tell me, what happens next?" Daniels doesn't have an answer. His career, his reputation, maybe even his freedom, all hang in the balance. The street, once his domain, now feels like a courtroom, and he is the one on trial. Daniels swallows hard, his mind scrambling for a way out. But before he can speak, a new voice cuts through the tension. "Judge Carter." A young officer steps forward, her face tight with concern. "Are you okay?" The judge nods, but the way his eyes linger on Daniels makes it clear this isn't over. The other officers shift uncomfortably, realizing they've just witnessed something bigger than a routine stop. Then, before anyone can react, the radio crackles. "All units be advised. Suspect in a hit and run near downtown. Vehicle matches the description of." Daniel's stomach twists as the dispatcher reads out the same make and model as Judge Carter's car. For the first time since this nightmare began, a flicker of hope surges in Daniels. Was this it? His way out? He looks at Carter, who remains composed, but something shifts in his expression. It's not fear. It's something deeper, something Daniels can't quite place. The officers exchange glances. Tension thickens. Daniels straightens, his grip tightening on his belt. "Judge Carter," he says, forcing confidence back into his voice. "Looks like we need to have another conversation." But Carter doesn't flinch. He just exhales slowly, almost as if he's been expecting this all along. Daniels straightens, his grip tightening as he clings to this unexpected turn of events. If the judge's car was involved in a crime, then maybe, just maybe, he could shift the focus away from himself. He steps forward, forcing authority into his voice. "Judge Carter, I need to ask, where were you earlier tonight?" The other officers glance at each other, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. The tension is unbearable, but Carter remains calm, his face unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out his phone. "I was here," he says, tapping the screen. A video begins to play, a security feed, time-stamped from an hour ago. It shows him inside a restaurant across town, nowhere near the hit and run. Daniel's confidence crumbles. His last hope of deflection vanishes in an instant. Then Carter turns the phone around again, this time playing another clip. It's grainy, shaky, but unmistakable. It's bodycam footage. Daniel's bodycam. The moment he shoved Carter against the car. The unnecessary force, the arrogance in his voice. Daniel's breath catches. He never even checked if his camera was on. "Officer Daniels," Carter says, voice steady but firm. "It seems the only person under investigation tonight is you." Daniels feels the ground shift beneath him. His fellow officers don't say a word. They don't need to. The truth is right there, playing on the screen for all to see. And this time, there's no way out. Daniels stands frozen, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. He looks around, hoping for some kind of defense, but none of the officers speak. There's no excuse, no justification, just the cold, undeniable truth playing on Carter's screen. Judge Carter exhales, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "I'll be filing a report," he says, his voice calm but firm. "And I trust the department will handle this properly." Daniels swallows hard. He knows what that means: an investigation, possible charges, and the end of his career. The badge that once gave him power now feels heavier than ever. Carter gives him one last look before turning to leave. "I hope you learned something from this," he says. As Daniels watches him walk away, reality sets in. For the first time, he's the one facing judgment, and this time there's no escaping the consequences.